Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we're going to continue with our lessons in Al-Arba'in fi Usuli Din. We've reached the 8th chapter, Al-Aslu Thamin fil Af'al, the 8th principle regarding divine actions. So here we are going to discuss Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a being, the creator of the universe, and He does actions. He's not just there, He actually does actions. Imam al-Ghazālī rahimahullah states, وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى لَا مَوْجُودَ سِوَاهُ إِلَّا وَهُوَ حَادِثٌ بِفِعْلِهِ. There is nothing existent besides Him except that it occurred by His action. So other than Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. Anything else that exists, it exists because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused it to exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it. وفائض من عدله على أحسن الوجوه وأكملها وأتمها وأعدلها, and emanated from His justice in the best, perfect, complete, and fairest way. So everything that is in existence, the entire universe, other than Allah, everything other than Allah that exists, it emanated from Allah. Allah created it. It's not a result. It didn't come out of Allah without His will. Allah willfully created all of it in the best way. وَأَنَّهُ حَكِيمٌ فِي أَفْعَالِهِ عَادِلٌ فِي أَقْضِيَتِهِ. He is wise with His actions and just in His decisions. So we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every time He does something, there is a wisdom behind it. Now, we may not grasp what that wisdom is, because we are not divine in nature. We do not have that type of knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does. Whatever He does, it's in accordance to His knowledge, and it's extremely wise, and it's extremely just, irrespective of how you and I perceive things, because we cannot see the bigger picture. At the end of the day, in the largest grand scheme of everything, it is just, it is the most wisest thing that could happen. ولا يقاس عدله بعدل العباد إذ العبد يتصور منه الظلم بتصرفه في ملك غيره ولا يتصور الظلم من الله سبحانه فإنه لا يصادف لغيره ملكا حتى يكون التصرف فيه ظلما. His justice is not compared to the justice of His slaves, for wrongdoing is conceivable for the slave by him meddling with another's property. But it is inconceivable for Allah, because none other than Him has any property to be wrongly dealt with in the first place. So here he says, very simply put, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not unjust. There's no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unjust. Injustice is a person doing tasarruf, doing some type of extra action in someone else's property. If you take someone's property, if you take their right, you harm another person, it wasn't right for you to harm them because you have no power over that person. Even if you enforce your power over them, they have their own rights. They are born with those rights. Those are rights given to them by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have no right to take someone's wealth, take someone's property, take someone's life, honor, dignity. None of that. However, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He owns everything. So it's not someone else's property, it's His own. Everything that He created is His. So whatever He does with the creation, it is just. So this is the Ash'ari point of view, that Allah is the owner of everything, and whatever He does with His own property, it's not going to be injustice. If you take your car and you smash it to bits, you have not done injustice to your own car. It's your own property. If you spend your money in a way that is not ideal, and you're not harming anyone, even according to Western standards, etc., it's not going to be considered injustice. It's your money, you earned it, you can do whatever you want with it. But if you harm another individual, if you take another person's stuff, that's going to be unjust. So this concept of doing whatever you want with what you own is how Imam al-Ghazālī is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not unjust, because He owns everything in the first place. فكل ما سواه من جن وإنس وشيطان وملك وسماء وأرض وحيوان ونبات وجوهر وعرض ومدرك ومحسوس حادث اخترعه بقدرته بعد العدم اختراعا وأنشأه بعد أن لم يكن إنشاء. Everything besides him, whether jinn or human, demon or angel, heaven or earth, animal or plant, substance or thought, abstract or concrete, is an occurrence which he invented with his power and fabricated from non-existence, bringing it into existence after it had been nothing. Everything that exists, every idea, every concept, every physical thing, every immaterial thing, the entire universe and what is inside it, angels, shayateen, which are demons, jinn, there could be good jinn or bad jinn, which are shayateen, and there could be good humans and then bad humans, which are shayateen as well. Angels, every single thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created from absolute nothing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it when it was absolutely nothing, and He didn't need any materials or any tools. He just made it through His knowledge, will, and power. إذ كان في الأزل موجودا وحده ولم يكن معه غيره. He has existed alone throughout eternity and nothing was with Him. So Imam al-Ghazālī is saying that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was alone, there was nothing but Him. Then the universe came to be. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not using tools. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not forced to do it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the universe as He wanted. فأحدث الخلق بعد ذلك إظهارا لقدرته وتحقيقا لما سبق من إرادته لما حق في الأزل من كلمته لا لافتقاره إليه وحاجته. So now Imam al-Ghazālī is talking about how Allah created and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth. Now this isn't a why in the sense of saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is compelled. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did it, and this is some wisdom behind why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did it. Not necessarily the impetus behind it, not necessarily the reason which forced Allah. Nothing forces Allah. He brought about the creation as a manifestation of His power. The creation is a manifestation of Allah's qudrah. The entire heavens, the earth, the cosmos, it shows you the power of Allah. And a realization of His will. It's a manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, to actualize what He had spoken since eternity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kalam, His speech, is eternal. Since eternity, He said that He would create the creation. He knew, He willed the creation to be, and thus it came to be. And not because of any need for it. Allah doesn't need the creation. He's not in need of anything. He's not in need of creation. He's not in need of humans. He's not in need of worship. He's not in need of anything at all. But He creates it as a sign of His power. He creates it for us to know that He is the one and He deserves to be worshipped, not because He needs it. As for we don't ask the question like, what was Allah's motivation? He is not contained by motivation. He doesn't require motivation. He is free from that. He's transcendent from requiring things to make Him do an action. We need motivations, like what was your reason? Why did you do it? What forced you into it? Allah's beyond that, transcendent. This is from our perspective, I should say, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it for us. This is a manifestation of His power. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us from our perspective. It is to worship Allah. Not that Allah needs our worship. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, na'udhu billah, feels lonely and He wants to be worshipped. None of that at all. That's a sign of weakness. He then says, the next page, وأنه متفضل بالخلق والاختراع والتكليف لا عن وجوب. His creating, inventing, and making us responsible was out of His grace, not out of obligation. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create us because He needed to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make us responsible to believe in Him and worship Him because He needs something from us. He doesn't. He's completely independent. ومتطول بالإنعام والإصلاح لا عن لزوم. He has been immensely generous by blessing us and making the world suitable for our existence, which he was not obliged to do. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not need to do anything. He did not need to create the world. He did not need to create you and I. He did not even need to give us iman. He does not need for us to perform salah, fast, etc. He doesn't need anything. فَلَهُ الْفَضْلُ وَالْإِحْسَانُ. Thus for him is grace and goodwill. وَالنِّعْمَةُ وَالْإِمْتِنَانُ. Blessings and gifts. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he did all of this without anyone asking, without anyone forcing him, it's completely the grace of Allah. The universe is completely the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إذ كان قادرا على أن يصب على عباده أنواع العذاب ويبتليهم بضروب الآلام والأوصاب ولو فعل ذلك لكان منه عدلا ولم يكن قبيحا ولا ظلما. He says, for on the other hand, he is capable of afflicting his slaves with every sort of torture and testing them with agony and suffering. Indeed, if he were to do so, it would be just, not immoral or wrong. So, our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he created the universe, he created all of us. This was a type of favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. A favor is when someone does something and they are not compelled to do so, and it benefits. So we are absolutely benefiting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creating us, and inshallah we will be in Jannah forever for all of eternity. It's absolute benefit for us. Now he is also saying, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to, he could torture us, he could put us into different types of punishment, and that would not even be unjust. As we mentioned before, Allah owns all of us. He is the possessor and owner of everything. Maliki Yawmiddin, and he is the Malik of the entire alam, owner of the Day of Judgment, owner of the universe. So if he was to punish us, he would be just. It would be his justice. Now he doesn't punish us, and he gives us so many different ni'mas and blessings. Every single thing in our life is a blessing. So because if he were to punish us, it would be justice, and he's not doing his justice, but he is actually giving on top of that. That is why this is fadl, grace, and a kindness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأنه يثيب عباده على الطاعات بحكم الكرم والوعد لا بحكم الاستحقاق واللزوم. He rewards his slaves for their obedience as his generosity and promise dictate, not due to entitlement or necessity. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards his slaves. This is generosity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not because Allah needs to. If you perform salah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you that reward, he didn't have to give you that reward. Actually, you have to perform salah because you're a slave. You don't need reward for it. But on top of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a reward. So this is a fadl and grace from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he is telling you you have to perform salah. So you perform the salah. On top of that, he gives you the reward for it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not compelled to give any kind of reward to anyone, but he does. And this is a grace from Allah. إذ لا يجب عليه فعل ولا يتصور منه ظلم ولا يجب عليه لأحد حق. Nothing is required of him, and it is inconceivable that he would be unjust. No one has any right over him. Allah doesn't have to do anything for anyone. There is no way Allah could be unjust. Absolutely no way. Even if he created billions of creatures and put them into torment, it's his creation. He does whatever he wants with his creation. We also, however, recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is extremely wise. And by looking at what Allah has done and what Allah promises that he will do, we understand there is a great amount of wisdom, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do what is best. No one has any power over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأنه حقه في الطاعات وأن حقه في الطاعات وجب على الخلق بإيجابه على لسان أنبيائه لا بمجرد العقل. All of creation, on the other hand, is required to recognize His right to obedience as He ordained it by the tongues of His messengers, not by mere reason. Imam al-Ghazālī, rahimahullah, is talking about something here where scholars differ, but the Ash'ari school is that people have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know that we have to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all these different types of acts of worship, salah, fasting, going for pilgrimage, zakah, all of these acts of worship, reciting Quran, doing adhkar. This is known to us by the messengers, alayhimus salatu wassalam, and the fact that we have to obey Him is known through the messengers, not by the intellect. Everyone agrees that salah, zakah, sawm, hajj is not something that you can conclude by mere intellect. If we didn't have revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's no way someone would know about salah. However, the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, can that be known without revelation? Allah is there, He is the sole creator of the universe, there is no partner with Him, there is no opposition or rival with Allah. Can that be known without wahi? Also, the fact that this creator of the entire universe, He deserves worship and no one else, can that be known without wahi? So a group of scholars, they state that no, it cannot be known without wahi. This is something that requires wahi. You need revelation to tell you that Allah is one, He exists, He created everything, and He deserves your worship. Whilst other scholars of the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah say that no, this can be concluded. You can conclude this with your intellect. If you look at the creation, you look at how everything was made, you will realize and you can conclude that there was one creator. This is rational. Once you realize that there's one creator, you also realize that He has the attributes worthy of worship, and I am such a great creation of this creator. I'm not going to use my intellect, I'm not going to use all of these beautiful qualities I have to worship a stone, worship another individual, worship some person here or there. That worship can only be directed at this divine being who is worthy of it. Otherwise, no one else is worthy of it. I'm much better than everything else. The human being is actually greater than any other creature. And that's why the intellect, it wants to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it realizes His grandeur and greatness. So he says here that this is one opinion, that this cannot be understood by mere reason. ولكنه بعث الرسل وأظهر صدقهم بالمعجزات الظاهرة فبلغوا أمره ونهيه ووعده ووعيده فوجب على الخلق تصديقهم فيما جاءوا به. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be known, the acts that He wants us to perform cannot be known without sending revelation. And revelation cannot be received by the majority of people unless brought to them by an individual. This is where the messengers come in. So he says, rather, He sent the messengers and manifested their truthfulness by means of clear miracles. They conveyed His commands, prohibitions, promises, and threats. It is required of the creation to affirm their truthfulness in delivering their message. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to obey Him in a specific way. This method of obeying Allah cannot be known to humanity without Allah telling us. And the way Allah will tell us is that He will send someone from among ourselves who can speak our language and talk to us and discuss with us and can show us practically how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the messengers of Allah. This is why He sends them. And when He sends them, some people will accept them because they see that they are truthful. Some people will be very doubtful. Some people will be obstinate and stubborn and completely go the other way. So in order to convince them that they are truthful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only sends these exemplary individuals, He gives them miracles as well. These miracles will convince people that this person is truthful. He can do something, and he claims to be a messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does things that defy the natural system and order of the world. If he wasn't truthful in what he said, could he do such a thing? He wouldn't be able to. So these miracles, why do the prophets display miracles? It is to convince people that they are from Allah, to give them proof. And so they come with these miracles and they convey what Allah wants us to know. The commands of Allah, the prohibitions of Allah, the promise of Jannah, the threat of Jahannam, and His displeasure. What is it required? What does the creation have to do? The creation has to believe in these messengers, recognize their status, and follow what they say, because they are accurate depictions of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know. And so this is the end of this chapter, chapter number 8. Next lesson we go to chapter number 9, talking about al-Yawm al-Akhir, the final day, which is Yawm al-Qiyamah, essential belief. And remember, there are 10 chapters regarding aqa'id and beliefs, absolute essential beliefs, without which our ibadah will not have any effect. And that is why Imam al-Ghazālī mentions them here. He starts off the book telling you what you absolutely need to know regarding beliefs, so that you can actually start worshiping. Without these, you can't worship. You could perform salah, but it won't count if you're not going to have these essential beliefs. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to understand, implement, and practice. وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.